On this episode of the Ministry of Motion Pictures podcast.
We found Blackmagic cameras, their hardware and their software, their color grading software and editing software was a huge gift. And again, this is all like, we would not be able to do what we're doing now if we had started 10 years earlier, because the tools weren't available. And now we can pack studios into our backpacks and fly across the world and just make it work.
You're listening to the Ministry of Motion Pictures podcast, where we call faith-based filmmakers to cinematic excellence, bold storytelling, and sound theology. I'm writer-director and your host, Todd Schaefer. I love filmmakers who are bold and think outside of the box. My guest today, Stephanie Quick, is a producer who's done just that. In fact, in the past 7 years, she and her nimble team of missions workers have produced 8 movies, armed with DSLRs and Blackmagic pocket cameras, with their studios based in home bomb shelters in the Golan Heights. The organization is called Frontier Alliance International, founded by Dalton Thomas. This organization is a strategic aid effort and a missional media production company. Their films are what I would characterize as cinematic documentaries, and their films are available to watch on YouTube for free. Their film that caught my eye was Sheep Among Wolves 2, which is about the explosive growth of the church in Iran. It has been watched over 600,000 times. FAI produces numerous podcasts that cover Middle Eastern issues, and they offer video Bible teaching that focuses on Israel, prophecy, and eschatology. This is episode 38. So Stephanie Quick, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Where are you located now?
I am in northern Israel. I'm in the Golan Heights, so nestled right up against Lebanon and Syria. And if we drive to the right spot on a clear day, you can get an eye on Jordan.
Oh, that's exciting. I'd love to get over there at some point.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
you are a writer, producer, and you're working for Frontier Alliance International. You've been involved in 8 films, Sheep Among Wolves, which is a series of films, Covenant and Controversy, which is also a series of films, The Frontier, Better Friends in Mountains, which is also a series of films. You've written a number of books, To Trace a Rising Sun, Confronting Unbelief. When I've gone to your website, I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of resources you guys have, and the things that you guys are involved in. You've got a nice app. You've got podcasts, films, global Bible studies, music, TV, dispatches from many locations where Frontier Alliance International is operating. And I think I counted 14, and yet there's some undisclosed ones. So can you just help me understand, what is FAI?
Yeah. The age-old question, the 8-year-old question.
Yeah.
FAI is first and foremost a creative access band of brothers. We were burdened by Romans 15:20, and Paul is kind of bringing the book of Romans in for a landing, and he's explaining, I'm going to come see you guys in Rome on my way to Spain, because he had to shift from his sending community in Antioch and get another sending community, another established community to support him as he moved in the other direction. He said, because I've made it my ambition to lay foundations for the gospel where there are none, lest I build on somebody else's foundation. Let me just go clear a path and pour the cement where it's not yet, and other people will come in and build the walls and put up the roof and all of those things. I myself joined FAI almost accidentally. My friends were starting it, but I just did not see myself. We were all in the South Pacific at the time. We were in New Zealand, and I had vision, dream, ambition, conviction that I felt was from the Lord to start what I was calling in my mind a missional media production company. And so Dalton and Anna were kind of shipping out to the Middle East, and I was literally like peace out, you guys, better you than me. And I took him to the airport, kissed him goodbye, and months later I'm on a plane following them, because I sent Dalton an email one day and I said, I've been thinking for a few years that somebody should do a film on the issue and theology of Israel as it relates to the Western church to bring clarity to some confusion and calibrate us to some truth, not necessarily because I was burdened for Israel, but because I was burdened for the integrity of the revelation of God in the scriptures. Tozer had, I read The Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer when I was finishing college a while back. And his premise is that what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. Because when you think about God, if something comes into you, if you hold an idea of God that is not true, it doesn't matter that you have good intentions. It's not true.
That's right.
And so we have to take full advantage of the way that he has disclosed himself. And I think that the stage upon which the play is set and the character is portrayed is Israel and Jerusalem. But we have no background in film at this point, and Dalton is a trailblazer. So he I was kind of hoping that he'd be like, let's talk about this later, and he immediately emailed me back and said, absolutely, let's talk soon. Because we were kind of like, there's like YouTube. This is 2012. Like, there's this YouTube thing now. Like, we could do something and just put it on YouTube, right? We had no idea what we were doing, but we kind of stumbled into film thinking it would be a teaching resource because people don't really read books anymore. And then it snowballed, which is another leg of the story. But we put out the Better Friends Than Mountains first volume, which was a field documentary about the growth of the gospel in Kurdistan during the ISIS years. And it blew up. I mean, for us, it was, we had like 5 fans on Facebook, and they were all of our moms. And all of a sudden we had 20,000 views. We had raised a ton of money for the refugee camps in Kurdistan.
Wow.
And we got flooded. I mean, like hundreds of people were emailing us like, how do I move to Kurdistan? And we were like, wait, I'm sorry, what? And recruitment and advocacy had always been a tenet, in our DNA. And so we were like, oh, film, teaching, mobilization, recruitment, advocacy, training. So in that regard, we really started to prioritize media. But I think, depending on the season that FAI was in as it formed, however people saw us, they were like, you're either a medical team going somewhere, and I don't have a medical background at all. Like, I squirm if somebody pops their shoulder. Or like cracks their neck. I'm just like, what's wrong with your body? Or there have been times where people were like, oh, you guys just really like you make films and you travel to the field and do stuff, about people who are on the field. And we were like, no, we've blurred all of these lines just because we felt like it needed to be blurred. But the bottom line was always declare the name and worth of Jesus. And so that was December 2011 was when Dalton and Anna officially, like that December 23rd is the birthday of FAI. So we're a little over 7 years old now. 2012, I jumped in, and as things have grown, now we have this multimedia library because we wanted to provide in a way to kind of resource people who have the gospel while we work to reach those who don't, and knit those two worlds together, bridge those two things together.
Yeah, I think one of the the exciting things for me was, we all have, most Christians have some sort of outreach orientation, and they're excited to see what's happening in other parts of the world that are inaccessible to us. And, when I found your stuff, I thought, wow, I really want to see what's going on in the church over there. I want to hear about the gospel succeeding in these places that are oppressed and persecuted. You must be familiar with Tim Cassie. He's done a series of videos called Dispatches from the Front, where he and he and his friend, they just go around to all the places across the world where they have ministry contacts and show the church in working in a certain culture at different parts of the world. And I've loved those. I've devoured all of those. And you guys are doing it in a smaller, focused region, getting into places where he perhaps doesn't have the access that you guys do.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you have gone at this first as a media company, kind of. That's what got you into this. And now you guys are involved in a lot of helping people, helping IDPs, and providing aid and that sort of thing, correct?
Well, yeah, it was kind of both at once on accident. Well, or at least the media followed the mission in a way, because the first wave of FAI was boarding the plane and heading to the Middle East, because this was, the early days of the Arab Spring, the dawn of the Syrian civil war and conflict. And Dalton has a pretty extensive background in his, he came to the Lord when he was like 18, and he's in his early to mid 30s now. And almost immediately he was engaging in gospel-based relief work, and had some experiences that just lodged it in his mind and in his gut that conflict would open doors that would otherwise remain closed. And so when things began to boil in the Middle East, he felt like the Lord was like, hey, it's time to go engage the Islamic world. And the Middle East is on the verge of hemorrhaging,
Yeah.
And some would say this is not the first time, but it's certainly the most pressing in our generation. And it didn't take long for people to look at the crises emerging from the Middle East and say, this is the worst we've seen since the Second World War. This is the worst humanitarian crisis in Syria that we've seen since the Holocaust. And that's, we wanted to be able to stand before the Lord at the end of our days or when he comes and say, we did the best that we could. We did not turn a blind eye. But I just did not, the Middle East was not on my radar at all. It wasn't on my wish list at all. I'm not one of those people who grew up thinking, I want to go serve on the field. I didn't. I wanted to move to Nashville. And so, the Lord was like, that's cute. But I honestly, I left New Zealand around the time I was emailing Dalton. I had spent about a year studying particularly the role of song in scripture, but just art in general. And was really gripped by, you have an instance like the nation of Israel getting out of Egypt. They plunder Egypt on the way out. And when they get into the wilderness and begin their journey, when the Lord gave Moses the blueprints for the tabernacle, he said, hey, there's two guys here that I have gifted as artists, and they're skilled in, all of these different things that you need to build this tabernacle, make it beautiful. And my takeaway from that has been that creatives and artists are specifically gifted by God to create something beautiful wherein people can encounter the better beautiful, where people can encounter their maker. And in that case, it was where his presence was. That's he would dwell in that tabernacle to be with his people. And I think that scripture, the Judeo-Christian worldview, more than anything that I've come across, dignifies artisanship and creativity to an extent that I think that creatives bear a burden of responsibility. I think songwriters bear a burden of responsibility that, doesn't make The thing is that you're then gifted as a messenger,
Right.
and I think that we need to. I think we need to regain that. I think part of the reason why we're in an age of, we're kind of embarrassed by different Christian media coming out is, I think there's a few reasons for it. Two of them are that we haven't taken it seriously enough. It was just kind of this cute thing that we do.
Yeah.
Or we've tried to follow the way the world built the infrastructure to do it, and that's never worked. Anytime there was a hinge in history, it was because somebody bucked the infrastructure in or out of the church. And so I don't think I would have made it in Nashville because the blueprints the Lord had given me were a missional media production company, meaning that we would build even a different financial infrastructure because we would need a different distribution model, which means that if I'm going to put food in my belly and keep my lights on, I have to figure out somehow to divorce those two things. Because if we're worried about a profit margin, we are vulnerable to compromising prophetic integrity. If you're worried about whether or not what you're saying is going to be well received and popular enough for you to pay your mortgage, then you're going to say whatever's going to sell. Right. And maybe the Lord is going to stir you to say something else, and then what do you do? And I just think that, I wouldn't build a doctrine off of this. I wouldn't put this on everybody, but it was really important for me that things be given away for free. So when I called Dalton and we started talking about doing this film, he was categorically on board, just all on every point. We were on the same page. And I was like, oh, I did not think, on my list of people that I thought, call these folks and build this thing together, I did not think call the guy who's starting a gospel-based relief organization in the Middle East. But it was the first of many boxes that the Lord would break down for me.
That's very interesting. I mean, it's exciting to hear you explain how you guys didn't really know what you were doing in film. You had this passion,
not a clue.
But you've got these convictions that are driving you, and you don't care what the outcome is. I mean, I think we need that. And when you compare yourself with, what you're doing with the music industry, the Christian music industry, I've always struggled with the Christian music industry because at one point I think if you took all of the music that we have, that we sing in thousands and hundreds of thousands of churches across the world, what is the theology that we're getting out of those songs? How deep is that theology, and can you build a really good theology upon the net result of all those songs? And I think there's a lot missing in there, especially when you compare it to the depth of and majesty of the Psalms. We don't have very many laments in our music, which I think is a tragedy in Christian music. But when you're talking about this, I'm thinking also, one of the problems that we have is that a lot of our filmmakers probably aren't very deep theologically, and so that's why the films that come out, even though they might be creatively substandard, theologically, they're also probably lacking in many ways. In fact, some of them are, because we've seen them. So, I think you're right. There's this prophetic aspect of being a creative that has to be in place and that we have to strive for. And then we maintain that as our conviction as we move forward. That's something I see you guys doing. I mean, the fact that we go there and we see all these films, plus then you have all these Bible studies on top of everything. You guys are really, straddling both, doing it right, pulling those things together for us.
Yeah, one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is that everybody, upon conception, you're given the gift of bearing the image of God, and you might blaspheme him all your days and you'll be held accountable for that, but there's no command about bearing his image in vain. there is a command about bearing his name in vain. And I think I think creative folks we love, like that we were created and that we love that we bear the image of the creator. That's appropriate. We should love that. But I think that it's difficult for us, maybe especially in like this day and age and all of the cultural nuances of I'm a child of the West. I understand the West and, the year 2020. I think we have a hard time harnessing a wiring that might be quite idealistic or emotional or whatever, in a way that we don't bring it into maturity. I think that we are almost, maybe even would be afraid to be mature. If you're not sad anymore, what's going to happen to your songwriting? But I think that if we can develop internal fortitude and have a plumb line in the word and walk in a spirit of revelation, which requires a life of prayer and fasting, like you have to be willing to be conformed into that kind of disciple so that you can say something that's worth hearing. And I just don't think that we talk about that enough. I think if you bear the image, you bear the name, you bear the message, to whom much is given, much will be required. And I think we underestimate ourselves. Like, we give the creatives kind of a pass. We give the artists a pass for being emotional or whatever. And then you have your pastors and your preachers, but those are different worlds. But there was a Scottish, I guess, a parliament member who was in the Scottish Parliament. Maybe a few years before the paperwork that made the union between Scotland and England's kingdoms official, it was a time of crisis in Scotland. They'd had this disastrous initiative in Panama that went belly up. So they're now like their only means of staying alive is England, and they've been trying to get out from under the English shadow for centuries. And this guy, Andrew Fletcher, very much opposed the Union, which of course they did in 1707. So somewhere around 1703, 1704, he's recorded as telling a colleague, he was talking about a lot of things in Scottish culture that he wanted to correct, but he said, what the really frustrating thing is, everybody in this room, they're all lawmakers and politicians. He said, we all know it doesn't matter what laws we write. It's the balladeers who steer the nation. You have to get the guys who write the songs to get the people on board. And because we're wired that way, we sing what we believe and we believe what we sing. And to that end, I think that we have to take the stewardship of like messaging. We have to take it seriously. We can't divide poems from the pulpit and say one's serious and one's not.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, even when you look at the rise of communism in certain countries, the place that they would spend a lot of their time watching and trying to recruit were the writers and artists and musicians and filmmakers, because they knew the power that media presented for mass change in a culture. And
sure. And you bar the songs from the outside. You don't watch the films from the outside.
That's right. And that's what we're doing now. And that's where it's really exciting for us today in this new world of media and the internet and distribution. Christians don't have those gatekeepers anymore. We can do what we want. You guys are perfect examples of setting up what you are convicted by, doing things your own way, and you didn't need some studio in LA or some TV station in New York or somebody to answer to. You guys answer to yourselves. You answer to your conviction and your God and Christ. I've always been baffled by how God's people can call themselves a people with a message. And yet through the past century, we've been a people with a message who have blundered one of the greatest tools in the world to communicate the message. I mean, we don't have a big footprint in film or mass media. We don't have a command of that. We're still in a place where we're struggling to find our place in this. And there's many reasons for that. But, with this heart of wanting to communicate our message, like you guys say on your website, you compare yourselves to Luther's use of the printing press. Luther saw the printing press as this amazing tool for advancing the gospel and work of the ministry. But somehow in our history in the church in the last century, we've lost that need to use whatever tools that are at our disposal, and especially in the mass media, and we've lost that. But, now we're in a new age and things are changing even for Hollywood. And I feel like it's a critical moment where the church needs to stand up, and Christians of conviction and who are creative need to step into this place and now set our mark and learn this media and these tools and get at doing the work of the ministry, utilizing the media. And that's what you guys are doing. You're sort of at the forefront. You didn't really know what you were doing. And that's exciting to me because the Lord is behind what you're doing. And that's why you're having all this success and moving forward. And I think you're a very good example for other ministries to step up and do things. I think in the West, we still have this tendency to make things a lot bigger and more complicated than we need to be. So I think there's this hesitancy of, even trying to do the kinds of things you guys are doing, but we just have to be bold and get out there and allow ourselves to fail and not be afraid of failing and just get at doing the work. And, we're seeing things change. Like Tim Challies has a new series out called Epic, where he's going around doing some things, sort of a documentary, just like Tim Cassee did with Dispatches from the Front. And Samaritan's Purse did an excellent documentary on that Ebola crisis with Kent Brantley called Facing Darkness. So there's things happening, but it's still very limited. And I think what you guys have done, how many films? Almost 10 films, 8 films in the last 8 years. And that's remarkable. That's remarkable.
But that's in part because we've kept it really nimble. There's only a few of us, and Dalton made this comment once before. Like if film was all that we did, we would do 10 a year, and that's not because we're awesome. It's just because it's so much simpler than I think that we think that it is. We've had a few people call us and go, "Hey, how are you doing this? And what's your budget?" And we don't have a budget. We buy airplane tickets and we fly somewhere. And I mean, like you said, what Steve Jobs did for our basement and bedroom studios is like the printing press. And if we can harness that, then what that does, the thing that made Martin Luther distinct, it was that he had the word of the Lord for his generation. Yeah. So that's what we need. Yes. That's what we want. Like I can go write songs till kingdom come, but is it going to help people navigate the days that they're in? And Luther he lived in the time that we call the Renaissance. The printing press was one of the children of the Renaissance, and the Renaissance came on the heels of the Black Death. And I think that, even I'm seeing this all over the internet now, that people are all these artists are, musicians. They were supposed to be on tour. They're locked in their homes. What are you going to do? There's this campaign of encouragement to create anyway, or be, everybody's kind of turning to Instagram, doing live shows, and all of those things are great. But I think what we're going to see is, we're having this conversation. How can we build something and move in a direction that's sustainable? So in the next, knock on wood, but say the next coronavirus, the next crisis, how can we not be shaken when things are shaken? And when we emerge from it, how can we can we offer somebody something
Yeah.
that they need? And I think this is in Scripture. I mean, you have prophecies concerning the return of the Lord, and in all of that crisis and calamity and confusion, there are people with profound clarity, and they're singing the clarity. They're singing a new song. So I don't know that that's what we're doing, but that's what we want to do. We want to be cool. We want to be like that.
What is the impact that you're seeing with your films?
Well, on one hand, we live in the Middle East, so every now and then we'll go to like a film screening or where we can dialogue with people face to face, or we'll get emails. And particularly now with the app, it's just we've got literally thousands more people in our, I don't want to say audience, but we've got more people using our resources, and therefore more people are reaching out to us. But there's this kind of beautiful hiddenness of it. Like we work on these things for months or years, like Covenant and Controversy, we've been working on since 2012. We're still working on it. We've got 2 films left in the series. But for all of that labor and intensity and stress, you just hit upload. And then you're kind of like, well, this fly away, little child.
And you do no marketing, right? There's no marketing except on your own platform, correct?
Basically, we're tightening it up. Like with Sheep 2 that came out last year, we brought in a buddy who's he knows what he's doing with marketing. So he helped walk us through some stuff that helped it lift the visibility on it. But oh gosh, like something like Better Friends 1, when it came out, when people are like, hey, I saw that film and it literally shifted life decisions that I made. There are people who are now serving in the 1040 window who weren't before or weren't thinking about it before. Everybody who applies to any of our training programs, maybe this is different now because we're getting more applications, but I feel like it's still the same. Every time we ask somebody, how did you hear about FAI, or what made you want to do this program? They say, I saw this film and I saw such and such film. And then it just confronted me. What am I going to do with, my days? And I don't think that the only appropriate response to any of our films is, I have to move to the Middle East. But I would hope that our films, our media, our podcasts, we're moving now into music production, that it would push people into the beauty and worth of Jesus in a very real, tangible, actionable way. What does it mean for me, alive in 2020? How can I be loved by Jesus and love him in return? What is he doing, and how can I partner with him in it? So we do see, we hear stories about that kind of thing, or we've got a ton of people who are now on our teams who joined us because of some of the stuff that we've put out. But most of it, we have no idea, and we won't ever until the Lord returns.
Walk me through the development and production of one of your films. How does it start?
Well, something like I'll give a contrast between 2 of them, and then you have things that fall in between. But something like Covenant and Controversy, we were like, okay, there is a dearth of clear resources on the everlasting covenant and why Jerusalem matters. So, and it's not an elephant that you can hug in one film. So how do we saw a need on a pastoral level, really. And when it first began, we were like, we'll just do a film and we'll put it on YouTube by the end of the year. So we thought Christmas 2013, this thing's going to be on YouTube. And then we got into it. Again, we had no idea what we were doing. So now we can look back and say, we were in pre-production. Other people would call that pre-production, but for us, we're making a movie. But we could not figure out. We had it scripted. You have your intro, your 3 points, your conclusion. But we couldn't figure out how to responsibly handle all of the content in 90 minutes. And Dalton kept saying, I really think we need to consider a series. And I was like, bro, we don't know how to make one of these things. We can't get one of these things out the door. And you want to make like 3 to 5? You're crazy. And also brilliant. Yes, we have to make a series. So then we took that outline and gave the intro its own film, the 3 points their own films, the conclusion its own film, and then treated all of them like a sermon or a teaching. If you were to go talk, what would your points be? And bring that together. And then we, throw a black sheet up on the wall and light it, get somebody sitting in front of it. We, film it. We found Blackmagic cameras, their hardware and their software, their color grading software and editing software was a huge gift. And again, this is all like, we would not be able to do what we're doing now if we had started 10 years earlier, because the tools weren't available. It would, you can't, now we can pack studios into our backpacks and fly across the world and just make it work. And then for a long time, Dalton will never say this publicly, but I can say it because I'm not him, but he carried most of the filming. We had a really small, a lot of the filming would be just any of us on our team. So depending on the film, depending on the project, something like The Frontier was filmed by a long list of FAI personnel because now we have cameras in every location. The Covenant series for a long time was really just Dalton and this guy Mark, who's our DP. He's from Australia. Just unbelievable eye and gift, and just the Lord just kind of brought him to us before we knew that we needed him. And then Dalton would take all of our hard drives with all of the footage and go sit in the cave, for weeks and months, stitching everything together, color grading everything, doing all the sound stuff. And now the team has grown where the Lord's brought in people who know the trade and craft, but it's still a really small, nimble team. But part of the reason why we were churning so much out was because it was kind of a one-stop shop. So this is what Dalton would never say publicly, but I can say that dude is a one-stop shop filmmaker. He can just knock it out. So Covenant was much more. We planned it. We've strategized. We've written it out. We've started it and started over and different things. Something like Better Friends of the Mountains started because we weren't even living in Iraq yet. I didn't have a team in Iraq yet, but we were exploring, and we had some connections there. So we sent a really small team with medicine and a doctor to do short-term clinics in some refugee camps from folks who had fled Western Iraq when ISIS came in, moved to the east, and didn't have their high blood pressure medicine anymore. And we had 2 Blackmagic pocket cinema cameras at the time. I had one and Dalton had one. So we sent both of those cameras, and Dalton just said, hey guys, film everything. We'll do some dispatches, like this is what ministry looks like it was like 6 months after ISIS had taken Mosul. So he was just thinking, we'll post some short videos so people know how they can pray, how they can engage. We'll advocate for this ministry that's working on the ground. And when he arrived, he heard this proverb that the Kurds have had for centuries, that the Kurds have no friends but the mountains. They're the largest stateless people group in the world. They have always been kind of the street dog that gets kicked around in the Middle East. And he was so burdened that the people of Jesus be better friends than mountains, that we prove that proverb wrong. So he looked at all the guys on the team and said, guys, just roll everything, film everything, because the story needs to be told. And then they got stuck in the airport on the way out, waiting for some fog to lift. So he starts doing a color wash on all of the footage. And by the time he got home, he's starting to stitch this thing together. And it was up on the internet within 3-4 weeks.
Wow.
It was just such a fast turnaround because he got gripped with it, and the story kind of wrote itself. He just had his ear to the ground and responded to it. And so, and then I would say that any other film has kind of fallen in between those two things of either like highly thought out or kind of spontaneous, just fell in his lap.
So is there any, so you're basically doing a documentary kind of thing where you sort of have a scripted idea of where you're going to go, and then you assemble the footage, and in the editing process, you sort of find the film based upon that. And then once you put it up, did I get that right? And once you put it up, is there any marketing that you are involved in, or that you do?
Yeah, I mean, we have the trailers, and we we might boost something on Facebook. Sheep 2, we were a bit more strategic with email campaigns and targeted ads, but it's at the end of the day, you're at the mercy of the internet. It's either going to carry you along or ride over you.
Well, with the amount of content you guys are putting up, it's going to naturally grow just for the volume of the content and the traffic that's continuing. That's really interesting. So your crew generally consists of what, one or two people when you go out to shoot?
Yeah, I mean, we could send two. I think like Sheep 2, because of the nature of the film and the folks that we were interviewing, because it focused on the underground church in Iran, that was real small. So like 3 people went, or 3, like the Dalton, Joel, and Mark helped shoot that. Dalton and Mark were carrying cameras. Covenant's like our darling child, and so now anytime we're doing those production trips, it might be a little bit more. We could plan those in advance and bring some. We've had friends hop on, and join the crew. So,
So when you find your crew, are they people who are ministering already in a certain region, or do you bring in freelancers who are film people, or cameramen or sound?
Oh no, they're like FAI team folks living on the field, or if we've got buddies or something like that. We've got a friend in the States who's a pilot who also built his own drone that was like better than any drone we could have bought, and he became our aerial cinematographer. So he flies in from the States sometimes. So yeah,
and they raise their own support, or they do it on their own dime. Is that it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where's the central location of FAI Studios?
The Golan Heights.
It's in Golan Heights, where you are. Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, of course, makes sense.
We've got a sound stage and studio. Every house in the Golan Heights is built with a bomb shelter. So the bomb shelter, I'm in a team house with a few of us, and then Dalton and his wife and kids live a few doors down from us. So both of the bomb shelters, and then we've got some basement storage that's converted to sound rooms, sound stages. It's, we're on lockdown for like 6 weeks now. We just kind of looked around and we're like,
yeah,
we could just sit in this room and film stuff.
Well, you guys probably have so much footage you could reuse and reconstitute for, another project.
Yeah, we have a graveyard of hard drives full of beautiful stuff.
So what's the future of FAI Studios? Where are you guys headed? Do you have a game plan for, the next 5 years, or?
Yeah, we've got a handful of other films that kind of, we could start tomorrow if we could travel. We've got to finish out the Covenant series, so that's a 5-film series. 3 of them are done. We were